The Early Weigh-In Podcast is back. Here to preview the best fights, best betting spots for the Saturday's UFC Vegas 116, where our featherweight main event is former bantamweight champion Aljamain Sterling, who's moved up, found a lot of success, taking on a rising contender, a guy once cut and grinded his way back here in Yusuf Zalal. And before we jump into things, always a quick recap of how we finished up last week. For myself, I need to let it go, man. I'm almost still kind of thinking about it. I hit my best bet. I hit my parlay piece, plus money play didn't come through again, but it was just inches away from a huge night. I felt like anybody who watched that fight with Castaneda and Balogun, that was the furthest thing from a draw. Castaneda beat the brakes off of him. I lowered my stake in the Phillips fight, knowing it was in Canada, took the decision prop. I should have hit that plus 270. Nalo is inches away from finding the finish. Both Moises and Gage Young have finishing moments. Just a super frustrating night to finish down a unit when I feel like I should have been up multiple units. So need to drop it, need to move on to this week. Wasn't that big of a loss. I throw it over to you, let you just briefly recap your non-existent card, but you did good last week, man. You had a couple good hits on the pod.
Yeah, so I just coming into Saturday, I didn't feel too confident in anything that we had talked about in the previous podcast, so I ended up just passing altogether. If you did watch the podcast, though, the best bet and the underdog both hit, but I am seeing a little bit more spots on this upcoming card that I definitely will be playing this week. So let's go ahead and get right into it. We start off in the main event where we have Aljamain Sterling taking on Yusuf Zalal. Now, Aljo opened as a 2-1 favorite and has since flipped to the underdog price tag. And I tried to find any reason in the world to bet Aljo at plus money, man. I really did.
Yeah.
I think that he is an underrated champion, ex-champion, and just an underrated fighter altogether. But I do think that he has his work cut out for him this weekend, man. Yusuf Zalal, he is coming into the prime of his fighting career at 29 years old. I think his recent form, he's just looked kind of untouchable. And even before he came back from the UFC, I think his footwork was something that, stood out amongst all the things that he had in his MMA arsenal. That being said, against somebody like Aljamain, who has relied pretty heavily on getting takedowns, I think that he's going to find it very difficult entering the pocket on Yusuf Zalal and eventually kind of exposing himself. The only thing that's really working in his favor is that we're in the apex octagon, so it is much smaller, less room for Yusuf Zalal to scoot around. And so there might be some situations where he could get the fight to the ground and hopefully get that backpack position. But Yusuf, man, he's also extremely good at scrambling. That might be his next best attribute in his game. So I just think that Yusuf is a little bit cleaner of a striker. I do think that he's going to have some moments where he rocks Aljo on the feet. And even in the grappling, I'm not sure that Aljo is going to have the same amount of control that the same amount of success controlling people as he has in the past against somebody like Yusuf Zalal. So I kind of think the grappling's negated, and I just think that there's a pretty high difference on the feet and the striking. So I've got Yusuf Zalal as well. How are you seeing this?
Pretty similar, man. It was kind of hard for me not to want to bet Sterling other than, earlier in the week, just based off accolades, accomplishments. And like you said, he gets a lot of flack. A lot of people don't like him, but he's an elite fighter, man. Phenomenal grappler. One of the best at getting the back in the whole UFC. Issue with him is, like in the pocket, he's never really developed much striking. Like in the pocket, he's pretty defensively poor. He doesn't have good hands, but the threat of the takedown that he has, man, it makes his striking, hard to deal with at times. It's unorthodox. It's awkward. It's just a lot of volume, spamming kicks at range. So, once he gets his game going, if he can land a takedown and worry Yusuf Zalal, like there is a world where Aljamain puts good volume up at range, but I don't see it, man. I don't really know how much of trouble he gives Yusuf Zalal. Zalal is not Calvin Kattar or Brian Ortega on the back half of their career. He's not a super one-dimensional Evloev. Like Zalal is good everywhere this fight's going to go. He's the one who's in his prime. He's 5-0 since coming back with 4 finishes. You got to look at him being 7 years younger. You talked about him just being worlds better on the feet and that footwork, that cardio, the fight IQ. Man, there's just so many things that Yusuf Zalal has on display that I think make a ton of sense for him to be the favorite at this stage in their career. But, going back to earlier in the week, I was just juggling how much of a favorite he should be and if there was any value to squeeze out of Aljo. But, man, like you said, I was looking for all the opportunity too. But at 37 years old almost, not in your championship weight class, it probably is a pass on Aljo for me. But, he's honestly been hit enough that I'm starting to kind of look at the use of Zalal side more than anything. I was kind of looking at goes the distance at minus 160 because it's featherweights, not really notorious dangerous featherweights either. So I don't know. I think doesn't go the distance at minus 160 is a pretty safe play, but I'm looking at Yusuf Zalal at minus 125, and that was not there earlier in the week. So, yeah, Yusuf Zalal is the side for me. I don't know if I pull the trigger, but I'm definitely starting to lean more clicking that side. Norma Dumont, Jocelyn Edwards, what a co-main here, man. I kind of like the spot for Dumont, honestly. I feel like it's a step backwards from beating a girl like Ketlin Vieira. On the Jocelyn Edwards side, you're clearly seeing improvements from the girl. She's finishing fights. She's always been decently athletic, decent striking, but I feel like where she's made really good leaps and things is in her wrestling and her grappling. But when I look at this win streak, man, it's pretty low level. It's bottom of the barrel. But to her props, again, she's finding these finishes at 4 in a row, and when you do that in women's MMA, it'll get you a big spot like this. I don't think she can get any of her grappling going against Norma. I think Norma is the far better grappler, the one who's way more likely to land takedowns here. I think Norma has a better cardio. I think Norma's got, the better pace, the better forward pressure, just the better boxing. I've been really impressed with Norma's hands lately. And so it is hard to want to lay the juice in a women's fight, but I did with Tatiana Suarez. I did with Jasmine Jasdavicius, and it played out exactly how I thought they were. So when I was typing these notes, man, Norma was minus 160, which is only 61%. And I think she's probably about 66% here. So I did play Norma Dumont at minus 160 for just a unit, just because I kind of feel she's on a different tier than Jocelyn Edwards. But, now she's sitting at like minus 230, minus 240. And I can't advocate for wanting to lay that price. But I'm pretty big on Norma Dumont. I think she gets through Jocelyn Edwards. I just think she's, again, kind of on a different tier. How do you see this fight?
Not my favorite co-main event, to be honest with you. I think that this fight is much closer than the odds suggest, especially at its current price tag.
Yeah.
There are a lot of positives on the Norma Dumont side. You listed most of them off, but there are some positives on the Jocelyn Edwards side as well. I think that, looking at Norma's last fight where she did spend a lot of that time on her back, kind of gifted a win in the Ketlin Vieira fight. And on top of that, I think when I look at the finishing upside on either of these girls, I think Jocelyn Edwards has more of the finishing upside. She just throws a little harder. And in this recent form, she doesn't want to see the judges' scorecards. In her last fight against Nora Cornoli, she didn't look great, but was able to turn it around on the dime. And where Norma Dumont, I think if Jocelyn Edwards is able to find herself on top, Norma might be done for that round. And it's just long, tall girls like Jocelyn Edwards that have given some problems to Norma Dumont in the past. Macy Chiasson is the fight that comes to mind. Now, I think Macy's a little bit better wrestler than Jocelyn, but if the intent is there, it certainly could happen. And then on the feet, I do think that there's going to be a little bit more – it's going to be a little bit more difficult for Nora to close that distance. So at these odds, I think all the values on Jocelyn Edwards, and if I were picking a side, I'd be playing the Jocelyn Edwards side, but I do give the slight advantage to Norma Dumont simply because I think that there's a push for the UFC. Like if I was wanting one of these girls to fight for the title, I'd be wanting Norma Dumont to get there. I do think that she's pretty well-rounded. She does have a little bit cleaner striking, but I am worried about the finishing upside on the Dumont side. So pass for me altogether, gun to head, Norma Dumont. If I had to put a unit on this fight, though, I would be putting it on the Jocelyn Edwards money line. For my fight of the night, we're going down one more fight to the featured bout of the evening, where we have Rafa Garcia taking on Alexander Hernandez. I just think that this is a great test for Alexander Hernandez, who's been kind of just mowing through his competition as of late. He's had this this resurgence in his career, and I think he's really hitting his stride at this point. Where Rafa Garcia, coming off of 2 wins, this is just a great litmus test for him. I think that we've kind of figured out that Rafa Garcia's kind of limited in where he can get in the 155-pound weight class. But I think that Alexander Hernandez has a lot of seeming holes in his game that Rafa Garcia could expose. Garcia is super, super tough. So I think that the strikes that have been putting people out on the Alexander Hernandez side might not put out Rafa Garcia. And if Rafa is able to extend this fight into those later rounds, we've seen Hernandez wear as the fight extends. Garcia is coming off of that 3rd round finish over Jared Gordon, and he's coming out of Elevation Fight Team. At least trains up there every once in a while, and I think that that's going to be great for cardio. Where Alexander Hernandez, coming off of that Carlos Diego Ferreira knockout, he's been not lucky, but the 2 fighters that could have tested him in that cardio, in his cardio, I think that he's had some favorable finishes with the Chase Hooper fight and the Diego Ferreira fight. We never got to see those extend out. So I'm curious how it looks against Rafa Garcia, who I know will push that pace. And I expect it to be a really good fight, which is why it's lined as closely as it is. If you told me this fight was going to decision, I would pick Alexander Hernandez because I think he's going to have the bigger moments in the fight. But I do think that it's going to get tricky in that last round, and I'm curious to see if it actually gets there.
Yeah. I like the Alex side, but like you said, man, I'm a bit worried as the fight progresses. I think Rafa becomes more alive there. Fight of the night, Montel Jackson versus Raoni Barcelos for me. On the surface, man, when you watch Barcelos go back and have success as a big dog, grounding Talbot, putting him on the mat, and then you see the way Montel's lost to guys like, Brett Johns and Figueiredo, it's kind of hard to feel like Barcelos might not be a live dog here. I'm kind of still on the fence why I wanted to dig into this fight and talk about it. My issue with Montel just almost kind of gets in his own way, the dude's got all the attributes in the world to be an elite fighter. I just feel like he somewhat lacks the discipline, the preparation needing to be elite at 135 in such a deep weight class. I think oftentimes he relies on the power way too much, doesn't put out the necessary volume. We've seen him now be taken down and not have a lot off his back. And on, the Barcelos side, it's a bit scary to back this guy because he's, getting up there close to 40 years old, but I can't really say that he's shown me a sharp decline yet in any of his game. He really hasn't. He's still going out there putting up really good volume. He's still out there able to land takedowns. And those 2 things, I think, have potential to cause Montel Jackson some trouble on Saturday, man. So I think it's a really close fight. I think both guys are on the cusp of a top 10. I know one of them's ranked top 15, top 10 spot. I think they both have good past victories. Montel could come out here and just spark him, with one good shot and lead to a finish. And I feel like if Barcelos gets his game going, he's going to wear on Montel as well. But Montel, to me, man, he feels so much more finish dependent here, and to have to lay that juice, not about it here, man. Whereas Barcelos, to me, has that volume, can sort of just out hustle him over 15 minutes, land a couple takedowns. At this number, I think plus 150 leads me to think that this fight's close enough. I have to lean Raoni Barcelos' side at the number. But I was actually looking at Barcelos' decision only, plus 105 on DraftKings. I think that's a phenomenal way to target this fight. I think if it goes to decision, you'd much rather have a plus money ticket in your hand. That probably means Raoni's landed a couple takedowns as well, probably has landed more shots. And so, if it's a finish, I probably lean toward the Montel Jackson side. But if it's going to decision, man, I kind of have to think the dog's super live here. Any brief thoughts on this one?
I do think that this is kind of Barcelos' last stand. I think that he probably gets caught by the much quicker, faster Montel Jackson.
Yep.
That happened in the Nurmagomedov fight, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of see something similar to that happening. But as the fight extends, I think it definitely leans Barcelos. Moving on to the underdog of the night, between two fighters. Not happy about either of these, but I do think that the more convincing win by an underdog would be by none other than Superman, Ryan Spann. We've got the line set at 1.5. Ryan Spann finishes all of his fights under 1.5, and Buchecha is there to be hit until he gets you on the ground. The line is heavily favored to the under, so we're seeing like say heavily, we're seeing like -175 for the under 1.5. And Ryan Spann's last 3 losses, they've all gone over 1.5 rounds. So I just think that at the jump of this fight, he's going to be the much faster guy on the feet. I think that there's potential for him to even sub the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu champion in Buchecha, because he will just completely sell out for submissions to get the win. And honestly, in that first round, he could beat anybody on this planet. He's a massive dude. He's been in the UFC for a really long time. Buchecha is still trying to search for that first win. We're starting to see the line come down, but you're still able to find Ryan Spann in the plus 120s range. And I just think that there's a pretty good chance that he finds a finish this weekend. So whenever I see an underdog and a pretty good chance that he could find a finish, I think that that's grounds to make a stab on him. So give me Ryan Spann here. Not a lot of confidence, but I think it could happen.
Who was your other one? Just curious.
My other one is Cedriquez Dumas.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, again, it's like I don't think it's going to be convincing, but Jackson McVeigh completely unproven, and I think Cedriquez has had, maybe not in the best headspace coming into the fights and everything. I think that he can make it squirrely, and I think the value is on Cedriquez's line.
Nice. Underdog of the week for me, going with Max Griffin plus 125. It got hit immediately, but the bookmakers actually opened Max Griffin the favorite here, so it's the bettors who have made him the underdog. And I think I kind of side with the odds makers. I think you could have Max Griffin roughly about a -125 here. I get that the guy's 40 years old, but he really has never shown durability issues at all. The gas tank has always held up pretty damn good. He's always putting out good volume, fighting at a good pace. I think he's the better boxer here. I think he's got a good jab, just massive advantages in experience and competition, metric advantages here. And, I think has potential to give this guy the vet lesson over 15 minutes. On the Victor Valenzuela side, this guy's been finished 3 times in the regional scene against far inferior competition. When I watch him, and it's not just the 3 losses, the fight before the Knitter series, he's getting rocked all over the place, man. I don't think this guy's got a great chin. And when I watch him on tape, the pace is good, but dude, there's nothing on tape that shows me that he should be a favorite in his UFC debut to a guy with 10 plus UFC fights, man. So biggest issue with Max is obviously the split decisions and the way he kind of fails to pull away in some of these fights. But it's just such a step down in competition that it's crazy. It's lined to go over 2.5. The spread on Max at plus 3.5 is -160. So they think it's going over. They think Max is at least 60% to win one round here. So at plus 125, give me the vet. Give me Max Griffin. I got it for 1.5. Looking to catch a dog this week, man.
Nice, man. We move on to our parlay piece or best bet?
Yeah, parlay piece.
Parlay piece. Okay. Line is not out for my parlay piece, but I know it's going to be better than his money line, and I think it's an absolute lock. Give me Rafael Filho inside the distance against Cody Durden. Durden's taking this fight on short notice. He leaves his neck out there. For him to have success, he has to get a takedown, and this is just not the guy that you're wanting to get a takedown against. Filho finishes everybody for the most part, and I think that they're setting him up to get a win here. So when that line drops, I'll probably be putting it in a parlay. Right now, Filho's sitting at like a -650. Yeah, -650. Some places -800. If we could get -400 or better on Rafael Filho inside the distance, I think there's still meat on the bone. So give me that for my parlay piece.
Mine is I got 2 units on it tracked already. I'm going Jackson McVeigh versus Cedriques Dumas under 1.5 at minus 166. I have I've been hitting these 1.5s, man, and liking it, having a lot of success with it. And so going back to the well here, man, McVeigh has never made it over the 1.5 round mark in his entire career. He's only been to the second round once. The guy pretty much just redlines from the start, just goes right after your opponent, looks to get you in the clinch. Dude, he does some nasty work in the clinch, good knees up the middle. And I think he's going to take Cedriques Dumas down, and that's where he's going to do his best work. I think once he gets down to the mat, he's probably going to run through Dumas. He's super aggressive at hunting to find the finish. And if Dumas is going to have success, man, he's got a slick guillotine he can threaten with. He's got some slick head kicks. I'm not completely counting him out, but I do think the finish comes on the McVeigh side. Dumas has never been one of these guys who we've seen try to fight through adversity. Matter of fact, 3 of his 4 losses are under 1.5, with the 4th loss being 30 seconds over the 1.5 mark. So I think the fight finishes pretty early here. I'm on the Jackson McVeigh finish, but regardless, I think it cashes me under 1.5.
Nice, man. For my best bet of the night, I'm going to be going with Alexander the Great Hernandez. The line is set at like minus 200 to go the distance. And I do think that there is a pretty good chance that we drop the 3rd round if we're betting Alexander Hernandez. But before that, I think it's going to be all him, even if he doesn't find the finish leading up to it. I think he's just going to be landing the much more significant strikes.
Right.
He seems to be much cleaner, and I just don't really see where Rafa Garcia could take over in this fight outside of just wearing him down. So, instead of taking the fight goes to decision at minus 200, I think we cover all of the finishing upside with Alexander Hernandez for the most part in those first 2 rounds. And then we also are more likely to see him get his hand based on the judges' scorecard. And we're only having to pay a minus 130 price tag. So give me Alexander Hernandez as my best bet.
I like it. I am going the Francis Marshall versus Lucas Brennan under 2.5 at minus 110. You got a good prospect in Marshall coming off a win just 2 months ago, no damage. Far better prospect of the two. This guy's making big leaps between his fights. I think he's the better striker here. I think he's the better grappler, wrestler, submission grappler, everything. His cardio's great, dude. Fought the far better competition, and I really feel like there's a reason he's a big favorite here. Got Lucas Brennan stepping up on just a week's notice here, and honestly, dude, I just think it's too big of a step up. I watched 2 or 3 of his fights, and I couldn't find an area where I didn't feel like he was inferior to Francis Marshall. So I like Marshall to get on top and sub him here. And if Marshall's going to look minus 600, I think he's going to find a finish. And you're only having to pay minus 110 for an under. So Francis Marshall, Lucas Brennan, under 2.5 for me is my best bet this week.
Nice. Moving on to the quick pick section of the night. We start off in the women's strawweight division. Talita Alencar taking on Julia Pilastri. I'm on the Julia Pilastri side. I've honestly been trying to fade Talita Alencar for a while now, and I just can't get the better of these odds makers. I think Pilastri, yes, she should be the favorite, but the line's just kind of getting out of hand. And if anything, I'd consider playing the Alencar side. I'm not going to, but just can't find the way to fade her right here. Give me Julia Pilastri.
So can I interest you in a Pilastri round 2 plus 900, round 3 plus 1400? I mean, it was there against Lupi, so everybody played it. It hits against Carolina, and how many times do we see Alencar slow down, man? Like, I feel like Julia the Psycho Pilastri can turn it up on this girl and find a late finish. So I'm probably going to track a quarter unit or something on the 2-3 props on the Pilastri side. Max Griffin, Victor Valenzuela. You heard me, underdog of the week, Max Griffin.
I'll just trust your read. I'll go with Max Griffin too. Not a lot of conviction on that pick though for me. Moving up, Francis Marshall taking on Lucas Brennan. Picked up Francis Marshall in the fantasy league. I am pretty confident in him. I think he'll get it done. Not sure if he gets it done inside the distance, but I do think that he dominates this fight from pillar to post.
Yeah. I like Francis Marshall here, and I like the under. Jafel Filho taking on Cody Durden. I'm with you, man. I just think it's a horrible matchup for Cody Durden, but props to the guy for stepping up multiple times on week's notice. I just feel like a submission grappler is his kryptonite, and Jafel Filho might be the best one he's fought yet. So Phil inside the distance by sub, however you want to play it.
Yeah, shout out to the company man, Cody Durden. Hope they re-sign him, but I think it's going to be hard to make that case whenever he gets finished and loses his like 5th or 6th in a row this weekend.
Honestly, dude, I think they're just letting him fight out the contract for stepping up like that so many times. Just let him finish whatever he's on and part ways. I don't see him re-signing him either.
Maybe so. Moving on to Mara Bueno Silva taking on Michelle Montague. Line's kind of getting out of control. I have not been impressed with Mara Bueno Silva myself. It's hard for me to bet her. It's hard for me to find value on her. But in this matchup against a girl with less than 8 fights in her entire career, I think that there is some value on Mara Bueno Silva. I don't know if I'm going to pull that trigger, but the line's out of hand. So gun to head, I'll take Michelle. But if you gave me a unit to play, I'd be playing him on Bueno Silva.
Yeah, I pretty much echo every single thing that you said here. I just can't get out of my head how crappy her takedown defense is and stuff, man. And, she's just too willing to play off the back. And Michelle's a big girl, fought at 145, I believe. So I think once she gets her hands on her, she's going to go down. Cedric Dumas, Jackson McVeigh. I like the Jackson McVeigh side, and I like the under 1.5.
I like the Cedric Dumas side. He manages to piss me off every single time he fights. But I do think that he's just getting counted out here. Jackson McVeigh still has a lot to prove in my head. I mean, Cedric Dumas, although he's not UFC caliber, he still is in the UFC, and he's better than all of the regional fights that Jackson was winning before he got to the UFC. So I think that the line's a little out of hand for Jackson to be a 2-1 favorite over anybody. Jackson's the type of fighter I like to bet whenever he's a big dog, but in this fight, I just can't justify that line. So give me Cedric Dumas. Moving up to 108 or staying at 185 pounds, Rodolfo Vieira versus Eric McConico. McConico is a tough SOB, but he got his ass whooped in his last fight. And Rodolfo Vieira, one of these fighters who it seemed like coming in, he had a ton of upside, but he was a little bit limited in rounding out his game. Obviously, if he gets this fight to the mat, he could sub McConico right away. But even on the feet, like Rodolfo has, added a pretty solid jab into his game, and I think that he could use that here as well. So give me Rodolfo Vieira. I understand why he's the favorite. I won't be touching that fight though.
Yeah, I kind of have the same sentiment as you, man. I just feel a little bit more confident that I think Rodolfo is going to be able to get him down. And if it's early, I think he finds the sub. So I hate any Rodolfo fight that goes late. His opponent always becomes live, but I kind of trust him to finish something here. I'm not much of a McConico guy. Kicking off the main card, Marcus Buchecha versus Ryan Spann. Look, dude, Marcus is got about 3 or 4 minutes of hell he's going to have to go through, a bunch of power he's going to have to avoid. But if he can avoid it, we've seen Ryan Spann quit multiple times, man, after the first round. And I think Marcus can put together the game plan to stay safe, mixing some takedowns and wear on this guy. So I'm on the Buchecha side here, but definitely not going to be laying the chalk.
Yeah, so I find myself on the opposite side, but again, not super confident. I'll take Ryan Spann. I just think that the finishing upside, Buchecha's been able to hold on in his last couple fights and not get finished. But I think this is the guy who might have enough of finishing upside early if he can catch Buchecha and the same early problems that Kennedy was able to. I think that Ryan Spann finishes it. So give me Ryan. Moving down to the bantamweight division, Montel Jackson versus Raoni Barcelos. I do think that this is the end of the line for Raoni Barcelos. I think similarly to the Umar Nurmagomedov fight, we're going to see just a much faster, more athletic Montel Jackson catch Raoni Barcelos early. But if this fight extends, it's anybody's game. Give me Montel Jackson to win, though.
Yeah, Montel is definitely the one with all the finish upside. I just feel like if it goes to decision, man, like, he just doesn't do a lot, man. So I'm kind of still eyeing that Raoni decision only at plus money and make things interesting. We'll split here. I'll side with Raoni. Continuing up the card, Davey Grant, Adrian Luna Martinetti. I don't know, man. Davy Grant's been hit from an underdog all the way to like minus 135 at this point, and I know I'm on another 40-year-old, but like Davy Grant's getting hurt and getting dropped and has shown me a bit more of a decline. And I don't know, man. Luna Martinetti is just a tough SOB, fights at a great pace. I kind of feel like the value is on the dog, but there's also the potential that Martinetti is just not UFC caliber. So my hands are staying clean here. I will not be betting this fight at all, but I'll take the dog against the 40-year-old. I'll take Martinetti.
It's just interesting that Martinetti was able to find 17 people to beat before actually having to face anybody good. Davy Grant, if it weren't for the age, he'd be an easy pick and maybe even my best bet for the card on Saturday. I'm still going to take Davy Grant. I do agree with the line movement, and I just haven't seen much other than the toughness out of the Martinetti side to make me want to bet him. So give me Davy Grant in this matchup. Moving on to the featured bout of the evening, Rafa Garcia versus Alexander Hernandez. Alexander Hernandez is my best bet for the card. I think he's the much faster, hits harder, and outside of some cardio suspicions, I think he dominates this fight.
Couldn't agree more, man. The line's coming in our favor as well, so taking an eye, monitoring that as we get closer to fight time. Co-main event, Norma Dumont, Jocelyn Edwards. You know, I could honestly drop a half unit on Jocelyn Edwards and profit if either girl wins. You don't really run into that a lot of times, so I might do it, but I still kind of just think Norma Dumont is just like B tier and Jocelyn C tier, man. I just feel like there's a gap between those two girls, and I should just trust my gut. I got a ton of closing line value. I'll take the Norma Dumont side.
Yeah, so just same thing as when we broke it down. I think the value's on Jocelyn Edwards, but Norma will be the pick. I think she wins this 6 out of 10 times if they fought. So I'll go Norma Dumont. Moving on to the main event, Aljamain Sterling versus Yusuf Zalal. I think Alja's going to really struggle trying to get those takedowns. Yusuf Zalal should get this done, and I tend to agree with the line movement. So give me Yusuf Zalal by decision.
Yeah, I think I'm in the same boat, man. I just feel like if Zalal can stop those takedowns, the fight's his, you know, and I feel like in the championship rounds, it's all Zalal. If I'm being honest with you, Aljamain is slowed down in the Peter Yan fights, the Brian Ortega fights, like the Henry Cejudo fight. Like it's on tape everywhere when I was watching it this week, and I think Zalal's got elite cardio and elite footwork, who's going to be hard to find. So I'm on the Zalal side as well. I like goes the distance. I like Zalal by decision as well, man. So lining up there. Appreciate you guys hanging out with us. All the fights, our favorite spots for UFC Vegas 116 this week. And as always, man, we'll be back next week. Y'all like and subscribe. See you then.
Peace.